Ask a question about disproportionality of those who are Christian who come here. Over the last 5 years, the estimates are that there's been 1 Yazidi, 53 Syrian Christians, and that 2.6% of the 2,003 Syrian refugees that have come to the United States are Christian. From Syria, so disproportionate to the need. Mr. Anderson, you spoke very eloquently to the issue of how there's a discrimination that happens starting in the camps, or at least those under protection of the UNHCR. That seems to be an area ripe for reform. I mean, 1 Yazidi, 53 Syrian Christians in 5 years. I mean, that's outrageous, I believe. And very few Druze, Baha'i, or Zoroastrians as well, like 10 total. Maybe, Mr. Anderson, you might want to expound upon a little bit on what needs to be done on the refugee side. And secondly, in the letter that was signed by you and many other people of faith, leaders, where there's a call for a limited review, when you exclude or narrow what it is that you're looking at so unnecessarily, which I think has happened or is happening at state. It's like a fireman, entering just one room in a burning building and concluding that one room of that building is on fire, while the whole building is ablaze. So my question would be, why the limited review? I mean, again, going back to Dr. Stanton, who just showed the connectivity over the years to this false reliance on terms like ethnic cleansing, which have no legal definition, and it was used extensively at the UN and here during Bosnia as well as in Croatia. And so if you could, what can we do to get it right immediately so that these refugees, and in follow-up to Ms. Bass, there has been a vote on pausing, but it's not law. Nothing precludes the person who was so sick getting that help right now from this administration. And why haven't they? I mean, that's what my colleagues and I often do with casework. We try to find someone who is really, really being hurt, whether it's a health issue or whatever, and trying to find a way through the bureaucracy to mitigate that pain. So, Mr. Anderson, did you want to touch on that and any others? Because we're going to have to conclude in a minute because there are 5 votes on the floor.
Well, then let me just say quickly, I think that it's very clear that the religious minorities are not welcome, do not feel safe in the camps. And therefore, if the process hinges on being in the camps, we have to find alternative mechanisms to go out and register these people outside of the camps. And so that requires an extra effort. And I think that's why the designation of genocide is so important, because it gives priority to these vulnerable minorities, which, as Mr. Ishmael said, cannot go back to their communities. Their homes are destroyed or occupied by other individuals. They have no opportunity. We're talking about 5, 10 years to get a visa and immigrate to another country. It may be that amount of time before they can go back. They could go back to their own communities, but by that time, what are those communities going to look like? They're going to be totally populated by people who are not just going to move away and say, come back to your homes that you left 10 years ago or 5 years ago. So I think the designation of genocide is essential to prioritize these minority communities that have no alternative in the region.
Thank you. Anybody? Yes, Dr. Stanton.
Just to reiterate that our conclusion as genocide scholars is that when lesser terms, weaker terms are used, it is a sure indicator of an unwillingness to act. In other words, it's a sure indicator of lack of political will. And in this case, what we've got is a lack of political will to accept Christians as on a preferential basis as the refugees that we will accept in this country. I think there's a general view that there should be no preferences at all. In fact, I think President Obama has said such, almost exactly that. And our view is that, in fact, certain groups are being targeted. And let's call what that means. Let's call out the right name, and that's called genocide. And that's why we think what's going on when they're making these selective determinations is an expression of lack of political will.
Yes, Mr. Gottschalk.
If I could just add, Mr. Chairman, in response to your point about, and Mr. Anderson's point about expanding the referral process, I think that's something we'd absolutely agree with, and just want to let you know there is in fact precedent for that. I believe at present there's one NGO that's been authorized to conduct referrals to the U.S. for resettlement. There's I think it's a short curriculum that NGOs would have to go through in order to, or any contractor would have to go through to be able to learn what criteria the U.S. is looking for. And it's something that we would very much like to see. It would be really a way of expanding the reach of resettlement referrals across the region. And just finally to add, the funding shortages that you made the subject of this hearing, and that I testified about and others have mentioned, has directly resulted in many refugee families really falling through the cracks because these appeals are so underfunded. 40% inside Syria, about 50% in the regional response. The prioritization is given to life-saving services, which means that social services and the types of activities that are really about protection and making sure that communities and refugees who are living in host communities where the majority are can be safe and can resolve some of their own challenges. Those type of programs just aren't being funded. The very types of programs that would identify vulnerable people, get them to where they could get referred for resettlement or for treatment or whatever they might need in the host community, if that was in fact the case. But those very programs are the ones that are really first on the chopping block when it comes to funding shortages.
Well, thank you. And that was an eye-opener for many of us at the hearing I chaired in September, just how underfunded it is. So your point is very well taken. And we are pushing the administration to do more, and our allies, too. We've asked them to give us the list of those who have not come forward with the pledges, at least, and what diplomatic efforts are being done by the administration to say to Saudi Arabia. I asked the Saudi ambassador when he was here in this room, or 2200 a week ago. He was claiming that they were giving 2.5 million Syrians refuge, and that they had spent $1 billion last year, including money for the people from, I think $1 billion was the total. It was approximately $1 billion. So your point's well taken, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. We got to push, and I even said, even if it's seen as a bridge, we try to get the others to come up with the money, but this is a short-term tourniquet that's needed. Because people, and he himself, Pitterman said, Shelley Pitterman, that the trigger for the mass exodus to Europe was undoubtedly the funding shortfall for humanitarianism, exacerbated by the World Food Program's 30% cut. They said, they don't care, we're off, we're leaving. And it was a point well taken. And we had PRM's assistant secretary here and asked what could be done. We're still trying to work with them. So I agree wholeheartedly on that.
If you wouldn't mind,
Yes.
as you wait for the list from the U.S., from the administration, Oxfam actually has a list of major countries and what they've donated according to their fair share. According to our statistics, Saudi Arabia has only contributed 6% of their fair share this year.
6%.
Qatar, 17%. United Arab Emirates, 38%.
Wish I had that last week, but I will follow up.
I'll
Please,
pass it on to your office.
Let's make it a part of the record if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments before we conclude? There is a vote, and I'm going to have to run. I do thank you so very much. I think the president got it wrong when he said that we don't want a religion test. This has to do with who's being targeted. It's a whole different issue than a religious test. And I again underscore my first trip on human rights issues was to Moscow and Leningrad, 1982, during my first term, on behalf of Soviet Jews. And I was very happy that our country was wholeheartedly using its policies, Jackson Vanik in particular, to protect Jewish people who were being put into psychiatric prisons or worse, killed. Yes, Mr. Ishmael.
For two important points, we hope that for the short-term solution, you can bring as many as possible of those needy refugees, especially those traumatized ones, whether they're in Syria, in northern Iraq, in Jordan, in Turkey. And for long-term solution, we hope that you could work with the Iraqi government and the KRG government to create a safe haven for the ESD,
Right, you had that in as your
Syrian,
number
other
3 point, I
minorities,
saw that.
so that these people can survive on their an ancient homeland that we have survived for thousands of years. Yes, there are many people because of fear, they want to get out, but there are also thousands of people, they say we are ready to die, but we are not ready to leave our homeland.
You know, if
So
that's done, it has to be better than what we've done before, when Srebrenica and other safe haven areas were designated, they became mustering areas
now
for.
most of the ESD,
killing.
if you ask, they're gonna tell you this is the end of the ESDs in Middle East, because no action has been taken actually to save them, to provide safe and security for them yet. Thank you.
Hearing's adjourned, and I thank you all so very much.
Thank you.